The culture is full of philosophical ideas. They seem to be driving society, yet materializing out of nothing. However, all ideas at their root are the product of individual minds. Open up any history book and you will see entire periods dominated by ideologies, from feudalism to fascism to the reason of their enlightenment, but with little explanation for their origin. This no longer has to be the case. We can understand the origins of these philosophical ideas in the culture and understand where they come from, as they are the direct result of human cognition. So, where exactly does philosophy come from? It is the natural result of the function of the human mind. We are distinct from all other creatures in that we can conceptualize what we see around us. Instead of operating purely by our perception and genetics, we can apply abstract reasoning to make concepts that act as predictive models for the world around us. Many people encounter philosophy in more specific forms, such as the philosophy of business or the philosophy of science, but these only discuss the most fundamental principles behind those domains. Philosophy itself is abstractions on the most fundamental aspects of nature and existence. All individuals have their own personal philosophy, whether they've articulated it or not. A personal philosophy can be tightly integrated or a jumbled mess, but it consists of one's judgments on the most fundamental aspects of one's life. The answer to the question of what is moral, or how do I know anything is true, are what makes up a person's philosophy. Everyone has gone through this. For example, an individual's observation of violence can eventually develop into an abstract principle on the nature of justice as one thinks about such experiences. At its root, philosophy is simply an extension of the human capacity to understand the world. As such, everyone ends up developing one as they live their lives. People are philosophical, even when they're under an impression that they are not. It's not particularly obvious. People do not see themselves acting philosophically, but in fact, there is no other way for them to act. Humans have no instincts. They have the faculty of reason, which they can choose to engage in or not. Whenever they have to deliberate over some choice or value, they bring to bear the knowledge that they have on the topic. No one intentionally chooses to fail to achieve their goal. It's either through inaction or a deficit in their knowledge that they fail. Philosophy pertains to a person's knowledge on the most fundamental aspects of the world. Consequently, it is the foundational drivers of a person's actions. For example, coming to the conclusion that it is impossible to achieve anyone's goals in life will lead to apathy, causing a person to disengage with life. Whereas, coming to the conclusion that the world is a product of consciousness would cause a person to act like a mystic, mistaking their own imagination for reality. These ideas are developed with time. They are the result of a person integrating their experiences into an understanding of the world. Maybe you say that a person's philosophy is just a matter of chance, that he bears no responsibility for it. This is false. It is something that is within a person's individual control. It is determined by whether or not a person directs their attention, whether a person works through the contradictions of their own ideas and experiences or decides to disengage in them. The fact that people have free will to pay attention or not is the determining factor of how coherent their philosophies are. But this does not negate the fact that they are ultimately operating by a philosophy. Philosophies that do not integrate an individual's experience will ultimately be rejected. This particularly occurs to those who are most conscientious in their attempts to resolve contradictions between their ideas and direct experiences. If an individual adopts a philosophical idea that is contrary to their experience, they will find themselves incapacitated in their ability to achieve their goals, as reality itself works against them. It's possible to compartmentalize ideas, but these people marginalize themselves because they cannot argue for their ideas without breaking those same compartmentalizations. Ideas that cannot explain reality end up getting marginalized by the sheer fact that human capacity for reason is what enables success, and no one wants to listen to someone that is all talk. Ultimately, philosophical ideas that do not offer an explanation for experiences in reality become marginalized. Knowing this, when you look at a culture and see philosophical trends occurring, you must understand that these ultimately originate from individuals. The culture is ultimately an aggregate of all the individuals that have any input into it. All philosophical trends, whether they are dominant cultural forces or undercurrents of resistance, are empowered by the integrations that individuals make throughout their lives. If many individuals believe that an idea is valid, it can easily become the dominant perspective within a culture. However, it's not as simple as that. Frequently, the idea that an individual makes from their experience clashes with the dominant ideas of the culture. When this occurs with enough people, there will be philosophical undercurrents against the culture. The culture ultimately shifts from the prevalence of ideas held by individuals. Now then, how exactly do you get a common philosophy in a culture? As I said before, people must integrate new information into their knowledge. This includes the challenges made by others in the culture towards their beliefs. What naturally occurs in a society is that there is a discourse about ideas. People challenge each other's beliefs and counter with new integrations. The end result of that is that the culture converges around certain ideas. Individuals are almost never in lockstep agreement with the contemporary culture. There's always a variation in how they integrate their experiences, but they end up falling in line because the culture established itself on the common denominator of the ideas shared by the majority of people. When people are challenged by ideas in the culture, they update their ideas and become more articulate in their agreement or disagreement with those ideas. Otherwise, they opt out of thinking about it and retract their impact on the culture. All societies engage in the exchange of information, which results in convergence of common philosophies within a culture. So how do philosophers play into this situation? I've explained how ideas become dominant through a convergence to a consensus. However, individuals can intentionally step into this process. Philosophers can challenge or entrench the consensus of the culture by their presentation of ideas. The challenge comes from prompting individuals to try and fail to integrate new information into their pre-existing ideas, causing a loss in confidence in those ideas. While in contrast, they can entrench a consensus by providing integrations that resolve challenges to the idea. There's a range in how philosophers integrate information. They can make simple integrations, or they can go to the extent of creating a formal system of philosophy. In this way, they disproportionately influence the culture, but their influence is ultimately dependent on whether individuals in the culture find these ideas integrate into their experiences or not. A philosopher who offers ideas that clash with the experience of his audience will find that those ideas will be rejected or applied selectively. In many areas, philosophers accelerate the development of ideas within the culture. They force individuals to confront flaws in their own personal philosophy and force them to try new integrations. Just as individuals must update their philosophical perspectives due to influence of the culture, they must do the same when confronted by the ideas of philosophers. Philosophy is a natural extension of how humans process information and understand the world, but it's not really understood that this means that all human behavior is impacted by philosophy. They're particularly oblivious in shifts in the culture driven by philosophy. For example, the current culture war over identity politics can attribute a large part of its momentum to the postmodernist position that there is no truth, only subjective experience that has gained increasing prominence. However, such an idea that all truth is subjective will have cascading impacts throughout the culture, whether it be in art or law, even if it is less obvious. These broad shifts in the culture are the things that many people have experienced, but find it difficult to understand. While philosophy may seem far removed from yourself, it is in fact omnipresent for humans, from the culture to all actions you engage in. Philosophy can be intuitively understood once you can observe how it impacts your own person. The actions that an individual takes are the result of their philosophy. What they consider right and wrong is the result of the integrations they made throughout their lives. The culture is an aggregate of all its individuals' philosophy. The ideas may be distilled and formalized by philosophers, but it is ultimately an extension of the individual's need to integrate information. As philosophy encompasses all domains of human knowledge, it is the unrecognized fountainhead of the actions of the culture. If you really want to understand the trajectory of the culture, you can do so by studying its philosophical premises.